So what happens is that every time you take in a lot of drinks, your body is attracted to fat. That is why when you take alcohol, your body cannot force you to eat nuts or beans. So every time you take in alcohol, your body tends to push you towards eating fat. And that's why you'll find people eating waraji accompanied with pork, with goat's meat, with roasted, whatever. So it's just normal that every time you put in a lot of alcohol, the alcohol does not demand anything from the plant source. It will want you to take a fat. And that is the metabolism. That's how it happens. So that's why you also realize that every time people are taking in a lot of alcohols, one, they may either lose appetite or they have higher appetite. But the appetite you receive is not for plant-based foods, it's for fat. So that is why alcohol abuse is another challenge altogether. Now, let me speak a little bit around about beer. When people take in a lot of beer, there is a risk that continuous intake of high volumes of beer will make people start putting on body weight. If you've seen people who drink beer every day, someone cannot sleep, they are restless until they take a bottle of beer. They tend to start putting on weight and around the stomach region specifically. So you see someone's stomach starting to protrude and you think they have gotten money. So sometimes I have always mentioned that alcohol has no nutrients. It has calories which are empty. So the body cannot manage to use them completely. So they end up being stored as sugar. And so that is why you even keep seeing people after drinking, they keep going to the urinal place to urinate. There's a lot of accumulated sugar that is not being used by the body, attracting water molecules, and so people keep running out to urinate. So people who still drink a crate of beer alone, you're at risk of all these non-communicable diseases. You're actually candidates. So there is always advice that if you're taking beer, it's 2 drinks per day, meaning that you can only take 1 or 2 bottles if you must anyway. But if it were possible, you needed to just leave the drinking to other people, because now you stand a risk of having all these non-communicable diseases. Some of the alcohols, especially the spirits, and the one they make in Kasese using banana, then this one of sugar cane, then those ones, they can actually cause organ damage. You see someone taking alcohol and even closes the eyes just because the caffeine is really hitting up with him. So usually when you take a lot of that, it can corrode or it can wear off your muscles of the throat, or even inside there. Just imagine that thing that passes in your mouth and you close your eyes. How does it behave when it lands on the liver, which is a soft tissue? So many people who have these challenges, when we open up their organs, you find the liver is black or the liver is having some sores just because of this kind of binge drinking. So alcohol abuse is also another risk factor. So away from healthy diets, alcohol abuse is another. Of course, smoking is another, because that one when we were making a policy on tobacco, we said actually the best we can do is to even run away from it, because so tobacco smoking in itself causes lung cancer, and that is even written on top of that thing, so of the package. So tobacco smoking can be a very big risk factor to cancers, especially the lung cancer. By the way, this smoking, it is either first-hand smoking or second-hand smoking. Second-hand smoking is when you're near someone who is actually smoking. That smoke that leaves that person and comes and enters into your nose or mouth is so dangerous to you as well. So you've not taken in, but you're breathing secondary smoke from the other person. That can be another risk factor. We have a sedentary lifestyle as another risk factor. Sedentary lifestyle means that you, first of all, you are eating a lot of food, but there's nothing you are doing. So many times you are just on your computer, on your desk, on your games, on whatever. There is nothing big you're doing. So when you leave office or wherever you are, you just get a boda or you drive home, or in other words, your body is not used to burn down the food that you've actually eaten. So it's either boda or a car, in office or in bed. So literally your body is not being used for anything. So for heaven's sake, what you're doing is you're basically sitting and eating, and so there's nothing big that you're doing to burn down the food. So what is the risk? The moment you're eating a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of fat, you're drinking, but you're not using the body, it simply means that all you're eating is going to be converted into fat, and that fat is stored in the different body organs. You can have what we call visceral fat, the fat that goes on the different body organs. So they tell you the heart was found with fat, or there was a lot of fat on the liver, there was a lot of fat on the kidney. You've heard those stories when someone dies. They tell you, the person had a lot of fat had accumulated around the heart. So that is called visceral fat. So the organs can have this fat and they stop functioning normally. So because of this low physical activity. So we recommend that people have really physical activity, what you guys commonly call physical exercise, but in science, we just call it physical activity. Make sure you've eaten food and you're able to use that food. Sweat, make sure you have something that is causing you to sweat or something like that. So sedentary lifestyle becomes one of the other risk factors, non-communicable diseases, just because it leads to overweight or obesity, which can result into a big risk to the non-communicable diseases. Now, there are other two things which I always want to end with. One is called family history, and another one is called genetics. These two are usually confused. Many of you now, you start saying, I think it is genetics. I have this high blood pressure because of genetics. Genetics must be thought about last. Many people who have predisposition and they want to call it genetics. For genetics, it would mean that your two parents, because you're sharing two genes, you're sharing 50% from your mother and 50% from your father. So if the lineage of your father, your brother, your sister, whatever, all of you in that lineage are actually having a particular non-communicable disease, then we could relate it with particular genes that your parents would be having. Currently, we have gene experts that you can actually know the type of genes that you have without necessarily waiting for you to suffer. You can easily know. Of course, from now, the studies on genome, we can be able to tell. From genomics, you can be able to tell which kind of genes you have that can be predisposing you to non-communicable diseases. Now, if you're the only one having the genetic predisposition, let us say, for instance, a father of somebody died of pressure. Then the last born here comes and also gets pressure. Then you start saying, no, that is genetics because my father was having it. No, genetics is seen when a lineage of you guys are all having this predisposition. So your father has it, your elder brother, your younger brother, everybody has a predisposition. So that one we can call it genetics. That there are particular genes, for instance, if you have them, you are at increased risk of having diabetes or hypertension. So we have some genetic predisposition where people's genes can influence them to have non-communicable diseases. But this is still on a small scale. Majority of our people are actually suffering from what we call family history. Family history is different from genetics. So family history means that you're inheriting a little bit from your parents, not the genetics. What you're doing, the inheritance here is that you, at your home where you've grown from, people are always eating junk. So you grow up knowing that junk is part of the food that you're supposed to eat. So you grow up eating the same junk. It's nothing connected to genes, but the lifestyle at home. So you'll also learn that most of the girls we have, whenever they get married, they will likely cook what they have been eating at their mother's place. When they have been home, what they have been eating at home is likely what they're going to start preparing from the husband's place. So that is kind of family history. Now, there are people whose families have been eating wrongly, have been having sedentary lifestyles, have been obese, have been overweight. So that trend follows the children, the grandchildren, and the entire family. All of them are very huge. They're eating recklessly. They have sedentary lifestyle. So that is family history. So your family, the way people are doing things becomes the same way that you live. So that way you can also have a predisposition to the risk factors. So ladies and gentlemen, these are the common risk factors to the non-communicable diseases that we are speaking about. Okay, so let us now look at another question that came through here was, Okay. Someone was asking now, okay, now what are we supposed to do to minimize these non-communicable diseases? There are a lot of things that we need to do, but what we need to do is to reverse what I've just talked about as risk factors. So stop smoking. If you are drinking alcohol, please minimize as much as possible. If you've been taking a lot of fat, please minimize the fat. If you've been taking a lot of sugar, please remember, I told you that the maximum that you can have. For women, please, for heaven's sake, don't exceed 7 teaspoons of sugar. I've always mentioned it. When you've been taking a lot of salt, please, you need to desist from taking a lot of salt, because salt is a very big risk to hypertension, as I explained in the earlier sessions. So people who take a lot of salt, they're at increased risk. Now, someone in Kasese was telling me that now you see, you guys tell us about salt, but now for us, we see a lot of pressure in our area and we don't actually eat a lot of salt. The salt we are eating is this one of Lake Katwe and whatnot, which is true, but I want to remind the Kasese people, for instance, if they are on this call, I've seen Katia, that our people in Kasese are eating a lot of chihalanganga. There is that thing called chihalanganga. I know Katia will give us more details. There is something called chihalanganga there. In Luganda, we call it mugongo wazi. Mugongo wazi is a fish which has been filleted, and so the fillet has been taken off, and people have been left with bones, and the only way you can preserve them is to salt them. So you find that in communities around Kasese and other areas, people are eating mugongo wazi or chukwara. There's another one called chukwara. It's another salted type of fish. So you find that someone is eating this salted stuff from January to December, and that is their super food that they're actually eating. So there is a risk that this kind of fish, which is salted, and you're eating it January to December, I see in that place, if you don't eat chukwara, you eat chihalanganga. If you don't eat chihalanganga, you shift. And this is put everywhere. They can put it in cassava leaves, they shift them, they put them to cabbage, they shift them, they put, so you see a family changing diet by eating different food, but in all cases, they're putting that salted fish. So there is a risk that this high consumption of salt can cause you trouble. It is the same to us who get eggs and then you start putting salt. Mind you, the nutrient that you need from the salt is already in the egg. So there is no reason why you should put raw salt on the egg. I have also seen some of you getting raw mangoes and then you are putting salt. All of those are risk factors, ladies and gentlemen. So we need to now look at how do we have food that is high in fiber. What is this kind of food? For instance, if you see posho and you see maize, one would think that these are two similar foods, but posho is different from maize. Maize is processed, posho is processed, the other one is not. So there is high fiber in maize compared to posho. Actually, posho, the number one you love eating, has nothing like fiber. What it has is just basically energy. So high fiber foods are those foods that are whole foods. For instance, your maize. Maize is high fiber food. Millet is high fiber food. Vegetables are high fiber foods. So those foods are actually helping us to overcome the non-communicable diseases. If it were possible, we need to desist from junk food. If it were possible, we need to run away actually from the consumption of junk. I am going to tell you what junk means. You'll be surprised to even go and buy this junk food. One time I was in Fort Portal and one of the colleagues on this call saw me and said, now Bernard again has come. Now we cannot eat this food. Please don't eat it because I'm there. Please just take it as a healthy living style. So let us, as much as possible, avoid eating junk food, because many times junk food has a lot of salt, a lot of sugar, a lot of fat. If it were possible, we may need to learn to cook from home. If that is not possible, some people have seen them pack their lunch. If that is not possible, we need to make sure that we read the labels. And this is where we talk about the nutrient profiling model, which we don't have in this country. Ideally, all foodstuffs are supposed to be labeled to tell you that there's a lot of sugar, a lot of fat, a lot of salt. If these labels are not there, then there is a risk that we cannot understand whether this particular food has salt, sugar, or fat. So that's why we want you to join us on this campaign to call upon government to put a regulation on how much labeling has to happen on the packaging materials. We want the materials, the food items to be labeled if it has sugar that is surpassing the limits. And then the person making the food product must put there that is high in sugar or high in salt or high in fat, so that the consumers can be able to actually buy food from the informed point of view. We also want to recommend that we do a lot of physical activity, or what you guys call physical exercise. This is to do with how do you use your body? How do you make sure that your body is in motion? You're able to, move, run, you're able to swim, you're able to dance. All those ones are physical activities, so that the food you've eaten is actually easily broken down. So it is also proper that you need to be having your medical checkups. Please let us always check ourselves so that you are not caught up by when it is too late. Let us keep checking whether our blood pressure is okay, whether our body sugars are okay, whether our lipids are okay. All those tests exist in the hospitals. For instance, we have a particular test called lipid profile. Lipid profile tells you how much fat you have that you cannot able to see, but is hiding inside there. We also have what we call a cholesterol test. Cholesterol test will tell you how much bad fat you have accumulated inside your organs, and so we can easily work around the clock to remove it before you have challenges. So that is basically that. Now there is my last slide here was on what is junk food. Someone was sending me a message and asking what is junk food. I assume that this one you know because you are the custodian. But literally, the word junk means useless. That is what it means from the dictionary perspective. Junk means useless or very low value. So if you apply this to food, it means that the food which has one, people would say useless food, but is food that is very low in nutrients. These ones are very high in fat, they are very high in salt, they are very high in sugar. So their nutrients are really poor components. They are very poor components of nutrients. So that's what we call junk food. Most of the junk food usually misses out on nutrients, like fiber. There's no junk food which has fiber. Some vitamins are not there and all that. When you talk about junk food, you're basically talking about useless food or food that is low in nutrients or low in value. So that is basically what junk means. And whenever you take junk, just remember from this simple definition I'll put for you that junk basically means useless. That is the definition. So every time you are eating junk food, you know that you are eating useless food or food that is low in nutrient value. Well, so those are some of the quick questions that came through. Someone now I can go to those other simple ones that did not require slides, where somebody was asking me about the replacement for sugar. In a situation where we are stopping you from taking sugar, what can we use? I have to make a disclaimer that we are not stopping people from taking sugar, but we are recommending that you minimize the consumption of this sugar. And how do we minimize? Some of you know how much sugar you actually take. I have always given examples that, for instance, if you're at home and you're making a cup of porridge and they're giving you a cup of millet porridge, millet in itself is a carbohydrate that when it goes into your body, it is going to be broken down. And when it's broken down, there are two things involved. Number one is that it is going to be broken down into glucose. Glucose is the sugar that the body needs to actually function, okay? So it means that by the mere fact that millet is a carbohydrate, you're already assured of the glucose that is going to give you. Now, adding sugar is luxury, actually. Adding sugar is just luxury. It is like milk. Milk in itself is carrying a sugar called lactose, what makes it a little bit sweet. That is already a carbohydrate sugar that is going to be broken down and used as sugar for the body. So every time you're adding sugar, it's just luxury. It is just luxury, really. So if you got 3 tablespoons of sugar and you added them to a millet cup of porridge, I know that many of you, when you reach office, you're going to get maybe another wrap. You get a cup of tea. And when you get another cup of tea, you also put 3 spoons of sugar. So already in the morning hours, you've already taken 6 tablespoons. And remember, for women, I said that your maximum should be less than 7 teaspoons. Now for you are using tablespoons. So between home and office, you've already taken 7. Now, many times we accompany this with bread. Someone is taking 3 pieces of bread. Each of the bread has sugar already. And sometimes now when it comes to office, someone is in the middle of some work around midday, then you get a bottle of soda. The moment you take 1 bottle of Coca-Cola, you are done with all your sugar allowance of the day. Because if you go to Coca-Cola, that bottle, it even has the numbers, how much sugar is inside there. When you compute it, you realize that actually you're taking more than 10 or so teaspoons in 1 bottle of soda. But many of you, you've taken 6 tablespoons in tea and in porridge in the morning. You'll go back home in the evening, you do the same. They give you a cup of tea with 3 spoons. Then you've taken 2 bottles of soda. Then you've taken bread. Then you've taken a cake. Then you've taken... So at the end of the day, you have a lot of sugar that your body is not able to deal with. So those are some of the aspects around sugar. Now, you can resort to use honey. Note that when you're using honey, you are not supposed to put honey in hot stuff. Honey must be taken in substances or liquids which are room temperature. So the temperature may either be room or not exceeding 70 degrees. So some of you now who just go and get honey, and then you put in a cup of porridge which has been boiling, and then you start crushing. There's a risk that you may have other unnecessary compounds that come from a breakdown of honey. So it would be very good that you can have your honey, please take it, but make sure that it's not in hot liquid. It's not in hot liquid. The other replacement for sugar would be stevia. Stevia is the natural sugar. This is just a plant, and many of you have tried stevia. You know that if you just get 2 leaves of stevia and you put them in a cup of tea, you'll be like someone taking tea with sugar. So that is the natural sugar that we have. Now, there is also what they call sweeteners. Now, those sweeteners, I will request you to save your money and don't use them. I have heard people say, you see, these are sweeteners, but they are not sugar, but they are sweeteners. So what are they? So aspartame, which is one of those, studies have also shown that it's not really good for some of the body cells. So I wanted also to warn you on the drinks that are now common. You call them energy drinks. So many of us are now taking a lot of energy drinks because we don't want to sleep, we don't want to doze, we want to remain alert and all that. Now, these energy drinks, the principle is, what is giving the energy has to be the question that you ask yourself. What is in this drink that is actually giving me the energy? 1 is the red sugar. 2 is either caffeine or some drug that has to keep your whatever alert. So if it is not caffeine, it could be another simple drug, but also with sugar. So these 2 have to boost your energy levels as fast as possible. Now, just imagine if it is sugar and you're taking 3 bottles of Rock Boom. So you're not only taking in a lot of sugar, but also you're taking in some bit of caffeine, which is in high amounts, to make sure that you keep alert. So I will also encourage us to desist from overconsumption of those drinks because they add a lot of sugar and also they add a lot of caffeine. So that is really about the sugar issue. I have seen people go for meetings, and while we're in those meetings, the person has just eaten heavy lunch and then they are busy eating cakes. Then you wonder what is not happening. So sometimes just that we don't know. So somehow we need to be careful on how we serve our meals. Okay, so I think that was it about the sugar replacement. Okay, others really were compliments. I think I can see the replacement of sugar. I've talked about it. Does sugar contribute to weight gain? Yes, sugar does, especially when it is overconsumed. I told you that when you consume sugar, by the way, I think I need to tell you that sugar, when you look at sugar, it has only one nutrient called energy. That is why sugar also falls in foods that have what we call empty calories, meaning that it only has energy. It has nothing like a vitamin or whatever. It is just an empty calorie. So every time you take too much sugar and you're not able to break it down and you're not able to use it, that sugar converts itself into a fat molecule. It can be stored anywhere as fat. So if you continuously taking a lot of sugar, you can have a challenge of either overweight or this sugar may not even manifest as overweight, but people start developing unnecessary fat around the organs inside there. So it is true that if much consumption of sugar can contribute to body weight. And this can also explain why sometimes the women who are who keep watching TV in the night, you know, women when they are coming from work, they go and buy their, you know, those snacks and they carry them in their bags and all that. At the end of the day, you find them at 2 a.m. eating ball gum, sweets, cakes, whatever, and they're not putting them to use. So it can be a very bad, it can be a risk to body weight. And then someone was asking, how does sugar cause diabetes? I think this one I still explained it last time, that is still associated with the fat that we get after sugar has not been used. The sugar rather is converted into fat molecules stored in our body organs or in our bodies. And now too much concentration of fat. When you have too much concentration of fat in your body, there are two things involved. The fat can actually cause or lead to what we call insulin resistance. So too much fat in your body is a risk factor to insulin resistance. Now remember, insulin is the hormone that is responsible for getting sugar from your bloodstream and taking it where it is supposed to be. Now, when you go into what we are calling insulin resistance, it simply means that your insulin, which is supposed to pick sugar from where it is in the bloodstream and take it to the cells, is inactive. So it is not able to perform that role or that duty as sufficiently as possible. Now, if the insulin is not able to do that, what that means is that the sugar remains concentrated in your bloodstream because it's not being taken away. And at the end of the day, you remain with your sugar in your bloodstream. And when you remain with your sugar in the bloodstream, that is what we are calling now diabetes. So diabetes is accumulated sugar or glucose in our bloodstreams. So sugar, yes, can be a risk factor to diabetes. Someone was also asking, is there a recommended daily amount of honey like there is for sugar? Now, one is that there is a risk that you may not be able to measure how much honey you are taking. The only guidance I can give you is to make sure that everything you are putting in your mouth must be in moderation. To avoid having a lot of sugar, you just have to eat everything in moderation. Then someone was also asking about, should the breastfeeding mother stop taking sugar? The principle is the same. Whether you're breastfeeding or whatever, the science is the same. So please, that one is just the same as I've explained. Whether you're breastfeeding, whether you are not, whether you're pregnant, you must minimize the consumption of sugar. Okay, then this one is saying, is it true that consuming no sugar at all is also a healthy risk? The other one is asking whether consuming no sugar at all is a problem. One is that every food that you eat is going to generate sugar at the end of the day.